Good morning, everybody. Welcome to meeting number 19 of the Standing Committee on Science and Research. The committee is meeting to study artificial intelligence. I would like to make a few comments for the benefit of the witnesses and also the members. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. For those on Zoom, at the bottom of your screen, you can select the appropriate channel for interpretation, either Floor, English, or French. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. Just before we start the meeting, I just want to let all the members know that like to inform the committee members that the Office of the Minister of Industry, the Honorable Melanie Joly, has informed the clerk that she would be available to appear before the committee in the new year. So just for everyone's information, that she will be appearing before the committee. Yes, MP Noor Mohammed.
Is that all the things you like? Because I wanted to say something about this. Is there more that you want to speak to on this one, or because I wanted to
No, yeah, that's what I want to let everyone know, that we have received the correspondence and she will be appearing. So we don't know the schedule of our committee meetings for the next year. Once the calendar comes out, we will schedule the meeting with Minister Melanie Joly. Yes, MP Noor Mohammed.
On the basis of the fact that at the last couple of meetings, I know that my colleague Mr. Blanchard-Jonca had been trying to get the minister to come. Perhaps now that we know this, it would behoove us to just move that we ask her to come to the committee. I'm happy to put a motion forward that she comes to the committee by no later than whatever date, end of January or the first week of February, whatever it is, and that we nail the date down as promptly as possible. I don't know if there's a willingness to do it. I'm happy to move a motion to do that in that context. But I think if we've got this openness to do it, we should just get it done quickly.
Yeah, so, once we have the calendar, the time of the meeting, we will schedule that meeting.
So, on that basis, do you want me to move a motion saying that she should come?
Go ahead. Yes.
Because I think if we've got this, let's just get it.
Yeah, go ahead. And then I have MP Blanchard-Jonca.
Okay, so, let me think about something. Okay, I made some notes here. That we would invite the minister to come no later than, February 5th? That's the first 4 weeks in, and then that's just get it on and say we want a date from her ASAP. So if I were to craft it in formal language, that the Minister of Industry, the Minister of ISED, appear before this committee, schedule an appearance before this committee no later than February 5th.
February 26th, we are coming back.
Right.
Yeah, so maybe the end of February might be a better idea. So just
you want to do end of February?
Yeah.
End of February? I would do it. No, I would say sooner. I'm sorry. I appreciate that, but I think we should say earlier February. I'm not trying to paint her into a corner, but let's just get it over with in the first 4 meetings. February. I would say February 5. But if you want to be more generous, you can. I would say February 5.
Is her attendance to speak to AI, or our colleague has a motion that speaks to mandate and other
I'm saying
aspects.
Mandate. I'm saying all mandate.
1 person at a time, please.
Again, my colleagues.
Okay, 1 person at a time. MP Noor Mohammed has the floor, and then I have the speaking order. I have Blanchard-Jonca, and then MP Mahal. And MP Baldinelli, would you like to speak? Okay, I will add you. So
I would just say, so my motion would be to bring her on all aspects of her mandate, not just on AI, and that addresses the challenge we've been having of trying to shoehorn it into a study on AI. But it also, I would say we make it on mandate and we put the February 5 date to it so that it's not dragged, inter alia into however many months it might take.
You will have to send that motion in writing to the clerk.
Happy to do that.
Yeah, we need to send it out to all the MP. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We are back on January 26th, yes. So 1 person at a time. Yeah, 1 person at a time. We have a speaking order. Okay. So we have a motion which has been brought by MP Noor Mohammed. Sorry to the witnesses, we are just coming like, let's sort it out. Yes, MP Blanchet-Jonca.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you
Écoutez,
very much, Madam Chair. I'm quite pleased that we are speaking about this meeting. I mean, we do have witnesses here today. We did have something scheduled already, but I am pleased to see that on the part of the government that they have done a little bit of soul searching over the past while. Because earlier on, I wouldn't have wanted to give the impression that they were trying to avoid the appearance of a minister. But I'm rather surprised, Madam Chair. I can see that you want to move things along, but last Monday, on the 24th of November, I tabled a motion in order to discuss the invitation of the minister and make sure that Minister Solomon come to speak within our study on AI. But there's something here that I don't understand on how we work as a committee. We discuss some things. Then you, on your side, you consider this, you look into it, you kind of take some steps, and it's almost as if there were two groups or two clans. There's the chair and the government side, and then there's the clan of the committee that talks about other things. That's what I'm seeing here today. So you have brought forward information with respect to the invitation of a minister, and I do appreciate that. But there was never a motion adopted to that effect. I'll just recall that on the 24th of November last, in public, we brought forward this motion. Colleagues opposite tried to sort of invent stories that really don't make any sense. They said, well, maybe it would be possible to bring in a minister, but we couldn't really bring a report before Parliament. In the 4 years I've been here, Madam Chair, I have never seen this type of thing. That is to say, things are discussed in a committee and where we decide not to bring it before Parliament. But there were colleagues last week who were saying, well, no, it's not possible to do this and to report to the House. But the minister is going to make some very important points here in committee. And it's important that parliamentarians be able to be made aware of that. We're making discussions that really concern other parliamentarians. So last week we were talking about one thing. And today, there's this surprise information, and it's making me very uncomfortable. I'm not sure that we're headed in the right direction when there's a decision to operate like this. You know, things happen behind the scenes, and then we learn today of what's happening. I get a message from a colleague expressing their goodwill, but that's not a functional way to operate. And it shows actually that there isn't much transparency on the part of the government. Last Monday, all I asked was that we invite the minister to come. On the 4th of November, there was a budget that was brought forward, and it had a $78 billion deficit involved. There's some good news, there's some bad news, but as parliamentarians, we have a right to ask questions on the direction the government is taking, and that can be done within the framework of this committee and elsewhere. But today, we're being told, well, the minister might be able to come, may not be able to come before the holidays, maybe after. We're being told by the side opposite, maybe they can come in February. So we're talking about from December to February, the beginning of December to the beginning of February, 3 months, and a minister can't come. A minister of a G7 country cannot make time to come before a committee of parliamentarians to discuss this issue. I mean, this is pretty serious. You know, I think this is sort of like a banana republic, if you ask me. So the minister is avoiding coming, and colleagues are supporting this. And all we want to be able to do is to put questions to the minister before this committee. I mean, I'm embarrassed on behalf of the government side. I'm embarrassed that they have to actually defend that kind of position. Now, I understand that perhaps the minister is a little preoccupied. I understand there was a trip to South Korea, and I understand how that might advance science in Canada. I understand that maybe she doesn't want to talk about the budget. However, one of our jobs is to invite the minister. So people have to speak the truth here. What do they want? Do they want to just protect their government and avoid the minister from coming? Do they want the people have an opportunity through parliamentarians to put questions to the minister, to be able to call the minister to come before the committee? So this is what I'm bringing up. And I would actually call on my colleagues to collaborate to show that they're willing to collaborate, because we have to be able to act. And through you, Madam Chair, it's your role to take leadership on this through the committee. And what I'm seeing once again today is that we failed in that regard. You have shown up with information without having told us. And I went to see you last week. I was told, yeah, we'll talk about it. And actually, I even agreed to put off the meeting for the chief science advisor, because I didn't necessarily want us to have to take up the debate on the motion again. But now we have this before us. And this all started on the 5th of November. We had a committee meeting. You completely skipped over the agenda, even though there was committee business that was supposed to be discussed. And you said, well, I got this information for you. Here you are. You'll be able to use it, despite the fact that we already had an agenda for that day. And here, the same thing is happening. So you call the meeting to order, and just as if by magic, government colleagues bring forward a solution, and you just open the door to that. So, that makes me rather nervous. It makes me nervous about impartiality, makes me nervous about this lack of neutrality, and it makes me nervous about a lack of objectivity. So could you please clarify why this is happening today, why these steps were taken without having consulted us before? That's my only question I have for you today.
Jonka, once we receive information, it is my duty as the chair of this committee to get that information to the members. So if we received correspondence that the minister would appear before the committee in the coming year, I have to inform the committee. So that's why I made that announcement before we could start, so that everyone knows. I have a speaking list: MP Mahal, and then MP Baldinelli, and then MP Nur Mohammed. MP Mahal.
No, I think my point was taken by
MP Baldinelli.
He can continue. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to my colleagues. I'm very sympathetic to the expressed disappointment my colleague from the bloc shares. In a sense, the motion that he had proposed was several days ago. And in fact, if we had settled upon the motion that he put forward then, we could have had the minister appear in a timely manner. My understanding is the minister is going to be appearing before another committee this week. Yet, if we had settled on this motion, we could have probably had the minister here appearing as well. And unfortunately, that hasn't occurred. I also have a concern, or a question, rather, with procedural aspects. So the motion that my colleague wants to bring forward is on the motion of the minister to appear to talk about mandate and other issues. So was that a notice of motion that he'll be tabling today? Because today we're looking at AI, so it's out of the scope of what we're supposed to be doing today.
I can clarify that because the fact that I made that announcement that the minister is appearing before the committee, so it was related to that. So that's why it can.
Again, from a procedural standpoint, I agree with the disappointment and questions that my bloc member has. If we had resolved this motion days ago, which we should have, the minister would be appearing. Now we hear it's not till the G7 because of the G7, and she won't be able to appear till after. Well, why is it that at first she refused to appear before another committee and yet will appear? I certainly have some.
Sorry for interrupting. I just want to clarify one thing, that we were debating that motion, and I was trying to suspend the meeting, but the meeting was adjourned so that we can hear from the chief science officer. Yeah.
Well, it could be brought up again, and it may be, in fact, brought up again, because we had asked in that motion for the minister to appear no later than or before December 15th, before we broke for the Christmas holidays. And so from my standpoint, again, from our side, I have nothing but disappointment to express to the government side. We could have handled this much more smoothly and to the benefit of all members concerned. And I don't think that happened, Madam Chair. And that's the disappointment. That did not happen. And from my standpoint, I've still got concerns. I still believe that we should try at least to see if we can get the minister here before the Christmas break. And then if not, then in the new year. But again, if we had handled this correctly, we could have had the minister appear as well as the Minister of AI, who we're getting on Wednesday. So I agree with the disappointment that's been expressed by my colleague.
MP Noor Mohammed and then MP Rana.
Well, I have to admit I'm a little bit surprised. First of all, like, with the greatest of respect à mon collègue du Bloc, si on trouve des théories de conspiration,
You know, if you start engaging in conspiracy theories, well, that's all very well. However, there was the wish to call the minister here, and I heard it at the same time as everyone else. I got the information at the same time as the rest of you from the chair.
Thought would deal with the issue, which was I thought we wanted the Minister of Industry to appear. Now I'm hearing that that's not what people want. They want to argue over a motion. If people want to argue over a motion versus having the minister here, that's their prerogative. I understood that the desire was to get the minister here as quickly as possible. Over the objection of my colleagues, some of you will have heard, I put this February 5th date in, not February 28th, to try and see if we can get her in the first 4 meetings that we've got once we come back. To my mind, if we can get her before that, great. It doesn't say that it has to be in January, it has to be in February. It says at the earliest possible date, but not after February 5. So if the idea is we want to bring them in particular to say, look, you've already got Minister Solomon coming on Wednesday to discuss this particular issue in the scope of his work, in the scope of the work of this study, and by extension, you could discuss the scope because it relates to this. Madame Jolie's mandate has nothing to do with the study. So the request that we were trying to make at the last meeting when we got into this debate in the first place, when, by the way, we could have, to Mr. Baldinelli's point, resolved it, but there seemed no desire to come to a compromise on this, was to say, we've got him coming, let's produce a separate motion that invites Minister Jolie to come on her mandate. Not necessarily part of this study, because I don't frankly want to limit the scope of my inquiry of Minister Jolie to just this particular study. I would like to talk to her about many other things. I would like to ask, I am sure that members opposite probably want to ask her about more than just AI in this country. So by jamming it into that motion, into this study, we are limiting our own ability to ask the minister questions. And this may surprise members opposite, but members on this side would also like to know certain things that expand outside the scope of this particular study from the Minister of Industry. And so the intention at that time was to say, look, let's not be silly with this. Let's deal with the Minister of AI who is coming on Wednesday. We don't need to worry about adding him to the motion because we've got a date, we've got an appearance, we're ready to dance on that. We don't have a date for Minister Jolie, but now we have understanding that she is coming. She's offered to come. We know when we know that she has said she wants to come. Instead of playing in theory, let's now nail her down to a date to be able to come. Let's do that in a timely fashion. Let's work as a group to be able to get that done. If that's the focus, Madam Chair, if that's what people want, that's what I was trying to do. But I have to say, I really, really take umbrage to this idea that somehow we're trying to jam Mr. Blanchet-Jonca from moving. If he wants to move the very same motion that I proposed, great. Let him do that. I would gladly support it. What I'm not going to support, and what we're not going to support, and I would imagine that members opposite probably don't want to do, is to support a motion that limits their ability to ask questions to just the scope of this particular study. And so this notion that's a conspiracy theory and using language like banana republic, I mean, yeah, I mean, it makes for a great clip, but I'm not sure that it resonates with where people are at, right? And so if people are looking for serious conversations happening in this committee, and I would say by and large, we've done a pretty good job in this committee, Madam Chair, of making sure that we're staying on point, that we're staying on the issues that we've got. And I really dislike the fact that we've got two witnesses to whom I would love to be asking questions right now. Three witnesses. I'm sorry. 3 witnesses to whom that I would like to be asking questions right now. But I do have to make the point. You know, we went through and we wasted a whole bunch of time, and we could have suspended that meeting, but instead we adjourned so that we wouldn't waste time with the National Science Advisor. We're back in the same conversation now. Again, so I say to my colleague opposite, if he's interested in having the minister come on something beyond the scope of just this study, that's the motion I've presented. I've put the most aggressive date possible on the basis of what we know and when this committee is sitting. Let's pass that motion. Let's get a date from the minister, and let's move on to getting to the witnesses. Or we can discuss this till the cows come home, and I'm certain that we have the capacity in this group to do that. But that choice I leave to my colleagues opposite.
I have quite a list. MP Rana.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As my colleague already mentioned, that Minister Office already has confirmed that she is coming. So I think we should not waste our time. We should move forward. Already we have 3 witnesses in here. And just only the time frame when she is appearing. Only we have 3 more meetings, I think, left before our break. So better, like as Talib, he mentioned the date. I think February 5th is not too far. We should wait for that date, and we should move forward right now. Thank you.
Next, I have MP Deschamps-Tarion. I would like to welcome MP Deschamps-Tarion to the committee. Now he will be the permanent member for the Science and Research Committee. Welcome, and floor is yours.
Merci beaucoup et je suis heureux de me
Thank
joindre.
you very much, and I'm very pleased to join this committee. I think together we're going to have some very constructive discussions in order to advance science and artificial intelligence in Canada. At least I hope so. Now, as Madam Chair mentioned, I'm a new member. I've taken the time to look at the various information that has been sent to the committee, and from what I understand, there are colleagues on the opposition side who expressed the wish to invite the minister so that she could speak to us about her mandate and taking into consideration budget 2025, because significant investments are included in that budget. So I think it's very important that we call the minister to appear before the committee so that we can better understand what those investments are and the direction that some of those investments are taking, including further detail. And from what I understand this morning, we meanwhile received a note from the minister's office letting us know that she's open to coming before this committee to speak to us about her mandate and give us further details. Now, when the chair informed the committee of this, that is to say that the minister was open to accepting the invitation to come before the committee, well, that was a very positive response. I think that was good news. It shows that there's an openness to collaboration on the part of the government. And then my colleague tabled a motion in order to make sure that this would happen in a timely fashion, because we don't want to end up having her before us in April. It's very important to have a date. So I think the way the motion was worded was actually that February 5th would be the latest date at which she would appear. So we already have a fairly busy schedule this week, and we have witnesses here today who I'm looking forward to hearing from. As a matter of fact, I have a list of questions that I want to ask to them within the framework of this study on artificial intelligence. We have a minister coming on Wednesday, so I think it's going to be very important to be able to ask these questions. Significant investments, up to $1 billion, are being provided in terms of funding under the sovereign computing strategy or AI strategy. So I have many questions I want to be able to ask. Now, if we want the time to have a good meeting with Minister Joly when she comes, we have to make sure that we have an appropriate time frame and that it happen by February 5th. If we want to meet her before February 5th, then we can do that. I mean, we only have 2 weeks left here. We have a very heavy schedule. It might happen perhaps within the first week or two when we come back. And as a new member, I'm very interested in some items. For example, recruitment and the money provided under the budget to recruit experts, international experts. I'd like to know how that's going to happen, how the money is going to be spent. Who's going to manage that fund? Who our partners are going to be? These are all very important issues that I want to be able to discuss with her. And there's the entire issue of artificial intelligence. You know, there's a budget for innovation and artificial intelligence. So I think that the motion calling on the minister to speak to us about our mandate doesn't prevent us from asking her questions about AI as well. Of course, we can ask any questions that we want to on that topic. If there are colleagues who want to ask her questions on recruitment, well, we can do that. But so from what I see is that we all agree on the importance of inviting the minister to come before the committee and to speak to us soon so that we can get more details on her mandate. I think we have a good motion before us from my colleague that would be easy to support. And when the minister comes to the committee, I'd also like to speak about the value of research in French. I'm sure that's important for other colleagues around the table. I've had constructive meetings with various stakeholders from the research sector who have asked me questions about this, and I don't have all the answers yet. So when the minister comes, I'm going to ask her questions about this. I'd like to be able to better understand how we're going to have this Francophone lens that's applied to the use of funding in research. One of our strengths in Canada is the fact that we can innovate and do research in two official languages, in English and in French. When Minister Joly comes before the committee, of course I'd like to be able to ask her questions about this. And what's our recruitment strategy, for example? I'd like to know how we're going to recruit Francophone international experts, for example, because I know there's cutting-edge expertise in this area, and I know there are French language experts who are international experts. So I'd like us to have an opportunity to apply that lens so that we can promote and foster research in French. I have these kinds of questions that I want to be able to discuss with the minister. So we simply restrict ourselves to artificial intelligence. Well, then we're not going to be able to ask all these types of questions that are important. So I don't think we should necessarily restrict this to AI. It wouldn't necessarily be as fulsome a committee meeting as one that we could have, because I'd like to be able to, as I said, bring up some other points. In my view, I think that we should support the motion that my colleague brought forward this morning, that we call the minister to come as soon as possible. I don't want us to wait until spring. We as parliamentarians have several questions that we want to ask, and stakeholders are also awaiting the answers to these questions. We want to be able to go back to these people in our communities even and speak to these people. I have university campuses in my region. I'd like to be able to go back to them and to be able to give them the information that I heard here in committee. I might have other points that I'll want to raise later, but for now, that is what I wanted to say, and that's how I wanted to contribute to the meeting. I believe my colleague beside me also wants to bring up some other points, so I'll end on that.
Then MP Baltanilli and then MP Noor Mohammed. MP
Madame la Présidente, écoutez.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Well, listen, I can see that the government once again is backpedaling, as has happened over the past several years. And from what I see, this, I have to say, is pretty historic. I represent my constituents very proudly, and no one has been able to say, no one is able to tell me why last week we weren't inviting the minister. And here all of a sudden we are. So, you know, the Liberal government, when we want to speak, interrupts us. I don't know why I'm being interrupted.
While I respect immensely the member opposite, he is misrepresenting substantially what was actually said by members on this side.
This is a point of order. MP Blanchet-Jean.
Président, je pense que vous venez de voir avec l'interaction de mon collègue.
Madam Chair, I think that this behavior shows that my colleague is not acting in good faith. He simply wants to represent the interests of his own government. And in my motion on the 4th of November, the wording was very clear. And I'll tell you what it was. Given the mandate of the Standing Committee on Science and Research, that the committee invite the Minister of Industry, Mélanie Joly, and the Minister of Artificial Intelligence and Digital Innovation, Evan Solomon, to appear for at least 2 hours each to discuss their mandate and other related matters. Other related matters. What does that mean? Well, that means everything that's included in the budget, that these meetings take place no later than December 11th. I'm being told that it be no later or as soon as possible. I would not want it to do it before the House rises. But here they're setting February 5th, several months after the budget. I said it earlier on, beginning of December to beginning of February. That's 3 months, Madam Chair. And last week, what they didn't agree to is that the committee report its findings and recommendations to the House following the meeting. So, this committee has been around since January 2021. How often have we discussed things in this committee that haven't been reported to the House? That's the challenge I'm throwing out to you. Answer me that. So, Mr. de Saint-Thériault spoke about openness and collaboration. Well, I welcome him joining the committee, but I'm going to tell him what openness and collaboration means. For a month and a half, I've been trying to track down the Minister of Industry. And as you know, science is not a word that's included in her title anymore. So that indicates the direction that science and research and innovation is taking. There's a focus on industry. Is that what openness means? When parliamentarians call on the office of the minister to obtain answers, not just once, twice. We want answers on the budget. Is that what collaboration means? I don't think collaboration and openness happens the way it's happened here. Madam Chair, the other thing that's quite incredible is this, and that shows how hypocritical this whole process is that on the 24th of November, we discussed a motion to bring forward the minister, and now it's as if all of a sudden the committee members are responsible for the minister's agenda. They've sort of said, well, maybe she'll be having a coffee and a muffin. She may not be able to make it. Maybe she won't be available. Seriously, Madam Chair, let's get back to the rules and procedures of the House. Standing committees are sovereign. If committee members want to invite the minister, invite parliamentary secretaries, or anyone else, it's not up to the committee to go and check the agenda of the minister. How should it work, Madam Chair? And please correct me if I'm wrong. From what I've understood, from what I've witnessed, the committee invites the minister and their officials. It's not up to colleagues to come here and say, well, look, we spoke with them. In the end, she'll be at the G7. She's going to be looking at submarines in South Korea. Maybe she can come after the holidays. Listen, I understand that my colleagues opposite are uncomfortable with the idea of bringing forward the minister. They sort of want to hide behind their excuses. But I think this, once again, displays the lack of transparency on the part of the government members. Madam Chair, you can see here today the kind of hypocrisy that reigns here. So you can also see it displayed when they don't want to actually report its findings to the House. Madam Chair, I challenge the member's office opposite to tell me when committee has ever decided not to present its findings to the House. I've been here since January 2021, and I've been sitting on this committee, and we've always worked in this way. But all of a sudden, they're saying, well, there's no point in reporting the findings to the House. I was shocked, actually, to hear what I heard last week. You know, they say, we'll bring the minister in, but we don't need to report to the House. There's social media, there's this, there's that, and nobody reads reports anyway. Madam Chair, I really can't quite believe what I heard. This was said publicly. I mean, do you know what kind of perception that gives parliamentarians? The image that gives parliamentarians? The lack of respect for our parliamentary institutions? My colleague said people don't read reports. I mean, it's as if the witnesses who are here today really have nothing of value to report, because reading reports really is not unimportant. Well, I absolutely disagree with my colleague. We're talking about tens of dozens of millions of dollars that we invest year after year after year to be able to undertake these studies, and they're important studies. And what they do is allow us to make recommendations to the government. But you see, Madam Chair, this is their vision. This is the government's vision that they have of democratic institutions. And, this comes from up on high. We've had a new prime minister since last April. He's hardly ever in Parliament. He travels all over the planet. And, recently what he did? He tabled legislation to circumvent other legislation. So I thought at the time, well, maybe this has already happened. We're in a crisis. But what is he doing? He's using the crisis to push his agenda forward and to circumvent other legislation. Bill C-5 was adopted in January. Now, I've hardly ever seen a gag order for things like this. After 4 weeks, the official opposition decided to to use a gag order. I was against that. And when I talk about circumventing democratic institutions, well, actually, their actions now show how much disregard they have for our work. On page 301 of the bill, there's the ability of the minister to circumvent any legislation except the criminal code. Why? In order to advance projects in the national interest. So what does that mean? It means legislation is meaningless because a minister can get up one day and say, this is an important project, and it's more important, it's important to put national interest first. And so, well, actually, the ability of a minister to do that, who has concentrated power to decide that a project can go forward by circumventing environmental legislation, financial legislation, transportation legislation, can circumvent even Indigenous consultation, Madam Chair. This is the same government that under Justin Trudeau was speaking to us about truth and reconciliation and how important it was. Well, what happened last week? It was a disaster when it came to the environment and science. What happened? Votes were bought in Alberta for a new pipeline. That once again, I understand that my colleague's uncomfortable.
The contents of what we're having right now, which is a debate on my motion, I'm not exactly certain how any of this diatribe has anything to do with this. It is relevant, Madam Chair.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Puis, vous savez, moi, je
Thank you,
tente...
Madam Chair. I want the people listening to us understand what's happening. And I realize, I say to our witnesses, it's important that you're here today. But, you know, the truth always comes out. And there are people who are listening to us. And people are going to see what that truth is. This is a government that has no environmental conscience, that couldn't care less about science and research, and that's buying votes in Alberta, just to sort of calm things down. That's what's been happening. And, you know, this government decides to showcase environmentalism. However, it's the facts that speak. This is the same government that bought a pipeline, cost $34 billion. You know, it has a name. It's called the Trans Mountain Pipeline. And they were going to be using fossil fuels and export energy to Asian markets. And everyone who has come before us today, everyone that came before us on that said this was counter to science. And who came before us? It was the chief science officer. And I put this question to that advisor. I said, do you think it's dangerous that the government is going to circumvent laws? Do you know what she said? And I'm going to quote her. She said, it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare that the government gives itself the ability to circumvent legislation and not make science and research-based decisions and evidence-based research to decide which projects it's going to support. So I understand why my colleagues today are so uncomfortable. You know, they're doing somersaults, verbal somersaults, but people deserve to know the truth. And I'm quite happy to take a few minutes here. And I'm not embarrassed to say before the witnesses who are here today to say this is the truth. Last week, these members didn't want to invite the minister, and now all of a sudden, oh, the light bulb went off. Now all of a sudden they want to bring forward the minister, but not unconditionally, not based on a committee decision, based on their own conditions. So 3 months later, 3 months after the budget, that's when they want to bring the minister. Well, I think that once again displays a total lack of transparency in the proceedings. And I'm going to repeat what my colleague opposite said. He spoke about openness and collaboration, and I appreciate that. I appreciate his good faith. Perhaps he's a little naive. It's maybe a little early to pass judgment. But if you look at the meeting of the 24th of November, you'll see that there was filibustering. And what does that mean? That means people speak, but they don't say much. They simply just sort of circle around the issues, and they string things out in order to be able to adjourn the committee. Now, perhaps they did some soul-searching. Perhaps they decided that last week's acrobatics weren't necessarily a good thing. And so all of a sudden they bring forward a motion today. But no one's able to explain what happened. What they did say was that, well, you know, you only wanted the minister to speak about one topic in particular. But that's false. I said last week that the minister come to speak about her mandate and other related matters, not just AI. So that's what I'm saying, Madam Minister. The truth always comes out. And when you do good things in life, you have nothing to hide. And this applies to projects as well. When there are major projects, if they're good ones, why would they have to circumvent legislation? This legislation is in place because it's good legislation, like environmental legislation. Take the pipeline that was approved last week. There's been no consultation with First Nations. It's going to be imposed. It's going to be imposed on British Columbia. British Columbia's agreement was not requested. And I'm really curious to know this. Show me scientific studies. Show me evidence. Unbelievable, I heard a colleague say. I know it's unbelievable. But this is the chief science advisor who said to us that this is a nightmare. It's a science nightmare. It's devastating that a government that claims to support science does not want to undertake scientific studies to see if their project is a good one. And so now they have legislation that allows them to circumvent other legislation. In the history of Canada, you know, I want to be on the right side. I want to be on the side of people who don't need to hide the truth. I want to be one of those people who agree to rigorous science, who respect legislation. Now, sometimes legislation does have to be amended, yes. But once again, I would ask people to look seriously at the hypocrisy of the government. They fabricate, they use a crisis, in this case the tariff crisis, in order to push their own agenda. And allow me to go even a little further, Madam Chair. I mean, the Prime Minister isn't just a good banker. He also has some pretty good contacts. So today, one wouldn't be wrong in wondering whether this benefits certain economic interests. Does it benefit people who are close to him? Madam Chair, in the Prime Minister's office, there's Michael Sebia. Well, we know him well in Quebec. We know that he worked at Hydro-Quebec and he worked at the Caisse de dépôt et placement in Quebec. And now he's working here within the federal government. He was here before as well at the Department of Finance, and I was a member at the time in 2019. And I was on the Public Accounts Committee. And Mr. Sebia, Madam Chair, he sold his shares in Brookfield. He felt that it was important that there be no conflict of interest if there were going to be federal legislation. He wanted to make sure that people would not have to question whether or not these are projects that are going to serve the financial interests of third parties. But, Madam Chair, here's the thing. It wasn't important to the Prime Minister to sell his shares. What he did was put it in a blind trust managed by two people on his team. So let's play a game, Madam Chair. I'm going to play with you, but I'm going to appoint the referees. See, that's how this government works. So I think we have the perfect right to ask ourselves some questions. Is the government truly serving the interests of the population of Quebecers, Canadians? If this government has nothing to hide, and if they don't want there to be any conflict of interest, well, step back. Say to yourself, I'm here to serve the population. Now, I can understand that our Prime Minister has a past as an investor, a CEO of Brookfield. I understand that he should step back from his shares. But we are accountable. We are supposed to be impartial and accountable when we decide to serve the public. And the Prime Minister had decided not to sell his Brookfield shares. And I'm pleased that the Conservative members have already said this kind of thing as well. Whenever the Prime Minister has gone around the world, there's always someone from Brookfield who's around, whether it be nearby or not, whether it be infrastructure, whether it be mining infrastructure, whether it be port infrastructure. So it's making us pretty uncomfortable.
Je questionne la pertinence des propos.
I'd like to question the relevance of the member opposite's point. We're debating a motion that involves the Minister of Industry, and now we're talking about international trade. I'm sorry, I believe it goes beyond the scope of the motion.
Merci. Monsieur Blanchet-Jonca, je vous demande de garder vos commentaires sur la motion dont
En dehors du Parlement, parce que ça vient.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, it's important what you do outside the Parliament because that can have an influence within the Parliament. And I look at the reactions of the government members. They want to hide the truth. They don't want us even to talk about this. They are so uncomfortable, Madam Chair, that they want to cut me off because they don't want me to say what their boss has done. But people aren't stupid. People are not stupid. I have a lot of respect for people who are listening to us today. But I would be pretty uncomfortable if I were in the shoes of my colleague opposite today. You know, I'm an empathic person, and I was very sad last week when the former Minister of Culture and Canadian Identity decided to step down. Stephen Guilbeault, we know he's a good person. He's an activist. He was an environmental activist before jumping into politics, and he has convictions, which is maybe not always the case of some of his colleagues in government. You know, it's always nice to get a good salary and to be part of the ranks. You have to choose your battles. But Mr. Guilbeault last week did something that was half honorable, I would say. He stepped down from his... You see, once again, there's an attempt to cut me off.
Je m'excuse de vous interrompre.
Chose, la motion porte sur
Once again, this motion is on the invitation of Minister Joly and Minister Solomon, not about an invitation to Mr. Guilbeault, so I don't see the relevance of what my colleague opposite is saying. Thank you.
It's relevant to the motion we have on the floor.
Merci, Madame la
Yes,
Présidente.
please.
Alors, je
Thank
poursuis
you very
toujours.
much, Madam Chair. So I'm still going to speak to this quest for truth because it's so important in science and innovation. People who do research are on a quest for truth. They bring forward hypotheses, and then they want to check those hypotheses against the facts, and they get an opportunity to see whether their hypothesis is right or wrong. Now, Mr. Guilbeault stepped down because he was uncomfortable with the decision that was made, the science supposed-based decision.
Relevant to this motion we have on the floor.
Oui, alors,
Okay, so thank you.
merci, Madame la Présidente. C'est le lien que je
Thank
fais.
you,
Alors,
Madam Chair. This is the connection I'm trying to make. You know, the reason I've put all of this before you is so that we can understand what's happening currently. Our colleagues are so uncomfortable about inviting the minister that they're trying to push it off to the latest date possible. And they do the same when it comes to, they did the same when it came to Mr. Guilbeault, so much so that he became a prisoner. And he had to leave because he was making everyone so uncomfortable, and he himself was so uncomfortable. And here today, people don't want to hear me. They don't want to hear me say this is not a government that believes in science. This is a government that wants to export fossil fuel-based energy, and this is something our government wants to hide today. So I'm telling you all this. Why? Because when Minister Joly comes, yes, it's important that we speak about her mandate, but I'm also looking forward to asking her other questions. The discussions, for example, that she has with the Prime Minister, for example, that have to do with science. The Prime Minister isn't just anyone. Yes, he worked for Brookfield, but he was also a former UN envoy on climate change. And do you know what he said? He said that fossil fuel energy have to remain in the ground. And then he did what he did last week, the opposite. He tabled...
Blanchet-Jonca, MP Rana.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Honorable member, he has a Parliament forum. He can discuss all these things over there on the Parliament floor. But in here, we have only science and research. I think we should stay on our mandate. And our honorable, all those witnesses, they are waiting in here too, please. Thank you.
MP Blanchet-Jonca, if you can please keep your remarks relevant to this motion. Yeah, it is important.
Madame la Présidente, oui, je répète ce que j'ai dit.
Well, Madam Chair, I'm going to repeat what I said. I said it's important that when the minister comes, and obviously I hope she's going to come before this committee for the holidays because that's what I asked in my motion on the 24th of November, But, I've seen this a few times now. There are a few members, not just one, not two, not three. They want to cut me off because they're uncomfortable with the facts. Now, I don't claim to always know the truth. I also don't claim to also act well necessarily. But if they're uncomfortable with what I'm saying, they can say so. I don't have a problem with that. What makes me uncomfortable, Madam Chair, is that last week they had one position, and then 7 days later they have another one. And that shows once again how deep this goes, how much a part of their DNA this is, that lack of transparency. Now we have a motion before us today. And it's not a motion that says the minister should come as soon as possible. Because Mr. Deschênes earlier said, oh, we'd like it if the minister comes earlier. Well, as quickly as possible, here's what they put in their motion today. This motion was tabled this morning. We did not receive an email.
This is the fourth time we've heard the same thing now. So while I appreciate M. Blanchet-Jonca's frustration, we can't deal with, if the purported intention is to deal with the matter at hand, repeating himself is not helpful.
Yes, so please make sure that it is you keep your comments relevant to the motion, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Écoutez, je reviens toujours à la motion. J'étais là-dessus.
Thank you. I'm going to come back to the motion. Actually, I was speaking about it. And once again, I do have empathy. I understand that my colleague Noor Mohammed is uncomfortable. Maybe he wants to interrupt me because he's so uncomfortable. I would ask him to look at the minutes of the last meeting. He said that we could use social media clips and reports were pointless because nobody reads them. And now he's a bit uncomfortable. So he's trying to sort of change things, change his words. I've been here since 2021, and I'm not embarrassed to say that I have always worked openly and collaboratively in order to move forward the committee's work. Now, the motion calls on the minister to come by February. Why? That's not consistent. If it's so important that she come before this committee, why only come 3 months after the budget? I have several questions I want to ask, and there are people I meet on a daily basis who have questions. And they want answers to their questions. Why do I feel so strongly about the minister coming before the 11th of December? Well, it's because I had been trying to track her down for more than a month. I had sent emails to her team members, and now I'm going to tell you something even more hurtful and striking. And I hope members opposite won't take this personally. But once again, I want the truth, and I want people to understand the truth. Members of the minister's office didn't even send confirmations or acknowledgements of the email I was sending. That's embarrassing. We have a G7 minister who's supposed to be able to manage their logistics, their agenda, and her staff cannot even take the time to read the emails that come from another parliamentarian. That's how huge the lack of collaboration is on the part of the government, and how little they want to work with the opposition. I'm going to make another point, and I hope members opposite think about this over the next few days and next few months. They are a minority government, and they were elected democratically as a minority government. And what does that say? That says that they're supposed to consult opposition parties, not just after the fact. Because here's another fact, and why I wanted to invite the minister soon. That's because there were never any consultations here within this committee. There was no consultation on budgetary issues with opposition members. We didn't talk about that. Nobody contacted me. Nobody tried from the office of the minister to speak to me. There was nothing about consulting opposition members. There was nothing about building public policy together. And there is one thing that I noted that my colleague said opposite. You know, he was talking about research in French, etc. Well, I don't have to ask the minister to come before us to learn that there is zero amount of money being put forward into French research. I mean, you just have to look at the budget. There is nothing at all, no dollars for science in French. And we know why this is happening. And what it shows is that it's not a priority. It's not a priority of this government. And this government has no vision. And that's the question I also want to put to Minister Joly when she comes before this committee. As my initial motion called for, I called for her to come in November because this would be her last opportunity to come before the committee. I don't mind bringing her back. I don't mind bringing her here on the 15th.
For our witnesses, it's almost noon. So sorry for that. Like, I know you came all the way from Toronto. We were on the same flight to appear before the committee. Is it possible that you can stay a bit longer? Maybe we will do is that, like, hear from the witnesses for this panel and the second panel after we are done with this. So are you guys okay to wait? Okay. Yeah. Okay. What about you, Mr. Gupta?
I am fine to wait.
Okay.
But my colleague does have a flight.
What time you have to leave?
It's at 2 o'clock.
She has a 2 o'clock flight.
So soon you will have to leave. Okay, just like, let's see, like another 5-6 minutes how it goes. Yeah, let you know. Yes.
If I may, perhaps a solution would be to propose a motion where we extend hearings by a day so that these witnesses can be invited back to attend.
Okay, that will be like once we deal with the motion we have on the floor. Let's deal with it and then we can go.
My deepest apologies for today, but these are witnesses that we should be hearing from, and we're in a procedural debate. But I was looking forward to this conversation this morning, and
so let's get through this, and maybe we will have an opportunity to have the witnesses give us their testimonies.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Écoutez, moi, j'espère de couper ce court,
Thank
mais
you, Madam Chair. I hope that this will wrap up, but I do think it's very important to state the facts. The problem goes deeper than it may appear. Now, I've explained several facts. I've wanted to make the public aware as well because that's my role as a member of Parliament. The public has a right to get answers to their questions. And as a member of Parliament, when I meet people from the scientific community, people who are involved in research and innovation, even they aren't getting answers from their MPs. So it is a problem. What I'm seeing today is this. On the government side, they want the ministers to come, but they want it to be based on their conditions. They want her to come later. I have no idea why. And maybe she'll be moved to another portfolio. I don't know. I mean, I like her well enough. And I want her to be able to answer questions here today. But the problem runs deeper, and it's this. We have government colleagues here who want to manipulate us. They want to manipulate negotiation. They want the minister to come, but they don't want there to be a report. They don't want this to be brought to Parliament. Madam Chair, there's no work done in committee that is not reported to Parliament. And that's where the hypocrisy lies. They're saying it's fine for me to table a motion. It's fine to bring the minister to the committee. They've said they've checked her agenda. Everyone's fine. But here's the condition. No report. No, we can't allow this to make too much noise. So here we have this G7 country minister to come forward. It costs millions of dollars to run this committee. But, Madam Chair, the government members say it's not important for them to report on this to the House. Now, I see my colleague Noor Mohammed saying that he doesn't agree. I mean, he did say himself that nobody reads reports, which is a total lack of respect for the work of Parliament. And he himself last week said what? What did he say? He said, well, no reports. People don't read them. And that's what I'm very uncomfortable with. I never thought I would see that in my life as a parliamentarian, that a minister of a G7 country appear before a committee and that members of her own government say it's so unimportant what she'll have to say that the rest of Parliament shouldn't be made aware of it. Well, what is that hiding? It's hiding something else. You know, when you're doing good work, I'll say this again, you have nothing to hide. You can share.
Notwithstanding the personal attacks, notwithstanding the rules in respect of decorum, putting all that aside, the member opposite has just pointed out for you, for all of us, and you're welcome to go and read the record, that he's repeating himself. So, like, if there's something new, I'd love to hear it, but otherwise, like, there's this absolute waste of time.
Thank you. MP Blanchet-Jonca, if you can.
Vous savez, Madame la Présidente, en politique,
You know, Madam Chair, I've learned one important thing in politics. Sometimes you have to repeat something over and over again for people to understand the message. And you have to do that so that people understand where the truth lies. Because as my colleague, MP Noor Mohamed, said last week, he said that social media clips, are more important. He said that on the 24th of November last. He said, invite the minister, you can do your social media clips. And according to him, that is more important than presenting a report to Parliament. Well, I'm embarrassed. I'm vice chair of this Standing Committee on Science and Research, and I am embarrassed that a colleague would say this public. He can think it. No problem. I think all kinds of things that, you know, I might not want people to know about. However, Madam Chair, he put out there publicly what his vision of democracy is, what his vision of governing is. And basically, that the work of the committee is unimportant. You know, he said government reports or this committee's reports aren't important because nobody reads them. Two things. This is repetition. I don't think we have any memory problems here around the committee. And second, this is not on the motion. We have witnesses waiting. So I'd like our colleague opposite to stop repeating himself and to keep it relevant. Thank you.
There's no repetition, and your points are relevant to the motion we have on the floor.
Merci. Vous savez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Truth is always relevant. And I see MP de Chanterio, MP Noor Mohamed are uncomfortable with the truth because it makes them look bad. You know, it shows their true colors, once again, and the government's true colors. It doesn't give me any pleasure to repeat the truth over and over again, but I want to make sure that my colleagues opposite understand the mess they're in, understand their behavior. This is public. And I know that this could be used against me. That's why I'm talking about the facts. I'm talking about what people have said. And they may disagree with me. That's fine. But what I want my colleagues to tell me today is this. And I hope that the way we proceed in this committee can be changed in the future, because I'm very uncomfortable with where this committee operates. How? I'll just sum up here and conclude on this, conclude on everything I've had to say that I think is very, very important. Very, very important for the public and the scientific community. I'll ask this. Why? Last week, did they not want the minister to come? And why did they engage in filibustering? You know, we weren't even able to wrap up our meeting, and it's public. And here they come back again today on the 1st of December. And it's as if my colleague took out his magic wand. He said, I have a solution. I spoke to the minister. Her dog is healthy. Everything's fine. And she'll be able to come in February. Well, Madam Chair, what changed in 7 days? I understood that it did snow a little. But once again, we can see that my colleague wants to impose his own conditions. Why? Because they want to protect the interests of their political party, of their government. He doesn't want the minister to come before a specific date. And here's another thing I want to understand. Why would they not want to report on what is said here by the minister? I'm very, very concerned about this. And earlier on, I challenged the government members to tell me that I'm wrong, to tell me that I'm wrong about that it not being important to report to the House. I think it's very important that people here understand what state this committee is in. Paralyzed, basically. And yet its work, the purpose of its work is to strengthen scientific research in this country. But here we have a government that says one thing and does the opposite. They say it's important for the minister to come, but not unconditionally. Transparency has its limits, according to them. We think maybe it'll work with her agenda in 3 months after the budget. And, in Quebec, we have a very important motto, and it's Je me souviens. We will remember. And I remember what happens in this committee. And I remember that there has never been a situation in which this committee has not presented its work, reported on its work to Parliament. If we want to be transparent, if we all truly want to support transparency when it comes to the work of this committee, we shouldn't just be talking about it within our committee. There are 343 members of Parliament. So this information isn't just important for the few members around this table. We aren't the only ones who should hear what the minister has to say. What she says here is important, and it has repercussions outside the committee. It should be communicated to Parliament. Everything that is said here is connected to what happens elsewhere. So that's why I'm emphasizing the importance of this. I hope that government members opposite will understand, truly understand, that when we do work here, there is a point to doing reports. And second, these reports aren't just for us. Our colleagues sitting around the committee. When you have a debate in Parliament, day after day, there are issues that are debated. And these aren't necessarily things that will have been debated in committee. There might be infrastructure projects. There might be health issues. There are all kinds of issues that are raised in Parliament. But today, there's going to be a precedent, and I think it's a very dangerous precedent.
Just 1 second. MP Blanchet-Jonca, just if you can hold for a second. Yes. Madame Agostino, you would like to leave because you have a flight?
Well, I'm trying to see if I can move it.
Okay. Check in, let me know.
No, well, he's going to filibuster till then. Wait, don't hold her here. Yeah.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Écoutez, moi, je souhaite conclure rapidement.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I really do want to be able to wrap up. I understand that there have been some conversations. Madam Chair, I do hope we'll be able to adopt the motion that I tabled on the 24th of November. The motion was never adopted, not because I didn't want it to.
Which was moved by MP Noor Mohammed, and then we can go into any other thing. So,
Oui, je comprends. Oui, c'est en lien, Madame la Présidente. Écoutez,
I understand. It's connected to this. Once again, I disagree with the way that the committee has proceeded with this motion. I tabled one on the 24th of November. You decided to suspend the meeting. In the end, it was adjourned. It was adjourned without a vote. And today there's a new motion that has been brought forward that kind of skips over the first initial motion. And that goes against the standing orders, our rules. So I'm saying that this is not a valid motion. Normally, we should have taken up this motion again that I tabled on the 24th of November. So there's that point as well.
and it was relevant to the point I made in regards to the appearance of the Melanie Jolie. So I said that yes, the motion is in order, and if you want to challenge, then you will have to challenge the chair's ruling.
Oui, Madame la Présidente, j'en comprends que c'est votre argument fatal.
Yes, I understand. That's pretty much a fatal argument, isn't it, Madam Chair, that we be invited to challenge the chair. I disagree with that way of proceeding. And, I went to see you in good faith last week. You told me that there would be a discussion, and we didn't end up having that. It was supposed to be a discussion on my motion, and now I see that you chose a different path. I think you made your choice. You chose to support a government member, and his tabling of a motion, and that mine would not actually be taken up again.
It was important for me to communicate that information
Oui.
in the beginning.
Alors, Madame la Présidente, je comprends que vous faites votre
Yes, I
travail.
understand. You're doing your job, and I'm doing mine. But I'm telling you what the truth actually is. On the 24th of November, I tabled a motion, and I want us to be voting on that motion.
Right now, we have a motion on the floor, which has been moved by MP Noor Mohammed. So we have to deal with that before we go into any other thing. So are you wrapped up?
Non, je voulais vous poser une question, Madame la Présidente, par rapport à ça.
No, I wanted to ask you a question about this. Why is it impossible to continue debate on my 24th of November motion? Because the meeting actually was never adjourned with a vote. It was, you wanted to suspend it initially so that we could call the chief science advisor back, which I'm uncomfortable with. Why are motions being tabled and then they're not voted on, and then a meeting's adjourned and we don't go back to that motion?
Was adjourned. At that time, MP Baldinelli moved that motion, and it's a non-debatable motion. And when I asked everyone, majority of the people said yes. And if you wanted a recorded vote, you should have asked for a recorded vote at that time. But majority of the people said for adjourning the meeting, and the meeting was adjourned.
Merci.
That's what.
Ben, écoutez, j'entends ce que vous me dites. Peut-être que dans la
Thank you. I hear what you're saying. Perhaps because it was so rushed, well, that's how things happened. But I'm telling you how I experienced it. It was so fast. I think what it meant is that people wanted to shut down the committee. I wasn't even able to raise my hand in time because the gavel hit the table. So I would ask you to be a little more open so that we can
Quick second with the witnesses. If you would like to take a 5-minute break to go to the washroom or anything, I know it has been over an hour.
I'm just worried about my colleague's flight.
Yeah.
Okay, have you been able to book or you have to leave?
So, yeah, because I'm not able to change my flight.
So you will have to leave?
So, if I may, I was hoping to at least read my statement and then take any questions offline.
Okay,
Is
so
that
by what
possible?
time you have to leave?
So probably 12:30 is the late. My flight is at 2.
Okay. Yeah, 12:30 she has to leave. So I will ask for the consent of the members if they would like to.
Madam Chair, and as I indicated earlier, I would propose a motion that we extend this hearing by a day to at least invite back our witnesses from the first hour so that they could fully take part in not only presenting their
Blanche
statements.
Jonka has the floor. I just wanted to talk to the witnesses. You are next. I'll come to you once MP Blanche Jonka completes. But I just wanted to ask the witnesses if they have to go to the washroom or they want to get something.
Sorry, Madam.
Yes, they can do that. Yes, MP
Madam
Noor
Chair,
Mohammed,
sorry,
if it is
just-
related to that. Otherwise, MP Blanche Jonka has the floor.
As he wants it, I'm just asking a logistical question because we have two witnesses that I think we'd want to ask questions from. If Dr. D'Agostino has to leave, and I think it would be good if we had an understanding of the committee and with her before she leaves what we would like to do. I mean, if Mr. Blanchet-Jonca wants to talk till the cows come home, that's his prerogative. I just want to know what we're doing with these two lovely people who have come that I think a lot of us have questions for. 3. Well, yeah, sorry. Miss Murphy. Yes. Dr. Murphy doesn't have a flight to catch, I don't think, but we have two folks that at home or so not here. So yeah.
In order to deal with anything, I'm coming, MP Director, we will have to have a unanimous consent if we can hear from Dr. Agostino before she leaves. it cannot be a majority thing or one person. It has to be a unanimous consent if we would like to hear her remarks. Because MP Blanchet-Jonca has the floor. Yes, MP D. Ritter, if it is related to this.
No, you just said what I was.
Okay. So, yes, MP Blanchet-Jonca.
Je souhaite juste qu'on puisse, évidemment...
Once again, I would like the minister to be able to come as soon as possible and that we be able to report on that. That's what I've been asking for since the very beginning. So I hope my colleagues will hear that. That is what I wanted. And I understand that there's been a lot of discomfort on the government side. But we would never have gotten to this point if my government colleagues last week had adopted the motion as worded that I brought forward last week. And as you know, Madam Chair, on the 24th of November I could reread it for my colleagues if they don't remember it. But in that motion, I was asking for the minister to be invited. So there was a whole week that went by. And on top of that, today they're saying, well, we want her to come, but there's going to be no report on the meeting. And these are two very inconsistent things. And I want people to remember this.
I thought we were going to see if we had unanimous consent to have Dr. Agostino say her intro before she has to leave. Maxine, could we
do we have the unanimous consent to hear from Dr. Agostino before she leaves?
Yes.
Everyone is in favor? Okay, so we will. I really want to apologize to our three witnesses and also to the other three who were supposed to appear before us at noon, as Dr. Agostino has to leave and it's a unanimous consent. So you have the floor. You can please give your opening statement. You will have 5 minutes. Thank you.
I'm very appreciative. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the members of this important committee for inviting me. My views draw on over 2 decades as a lawyer, policy analyst, scholar, and professor in intellectual property law, AI, and emerging technologies. My name is Pina D'Agostino, and I'm a professor at Osgoode Hall Law School at York University in a Tier 1 York Research Chair. I serve as the university's Associate Vice President Research and a Scientific Director of Connected Minds, a $318 million federally funded Canada First Research Excellence Fund, advancing transformative AI research. I also serve as the chair of the board for the Ontario Centre of Innovation. In addition, I'm the founder and director of the IP Innovation Clinic, Canada's largest pro bono IP clinic. Since 2010, we've helped over 600 innovators across the country recognize, protect, and commercialize their IP, saving them over $2 million in legal fees through more than 5,500 hours of pro bono support, resulting in many Canadian company success stories, millions in funding raised, and thousands of jobs for Canadians. As someone deeply immersed in Canada's innovation ecosystem, I see both significant opportunities and very real challenges. Canada's world-class researchers made us an early trailblazer in AI, yet we're now losing our competitive edge. If we fail to protect and commercialize our AI innovations, our economy will lose out. Global corporate investment in AI reached over $250 billion in 2024, and this figure is climbing. Now is the time to foster made-in-Canada companies to drive our economic growth and sovereignty. Central to any AI strategy must be the role of our universities. Across the country, researchers and graduate students continue to make groundbreaking AI discoveries. Yet, too often, they struggle to secure IP rights or see their IP transferred to foreign multinationals and funders. Strengthening university IP support is critical. A novel solution is to expand university-based IP legal clinics, highly effective to help innovators protect their IP. The IP Innovation Clinic is a leader in this area, and clinics across the country have blossomed based on our model and thanks to our alumni. A second solution is for tech transfer offices and other innovation hubs to specialize and focus by sector. For example, machine learning, quantum, neurotech, biotech, and clean tech, rather than support all emerging tech in lots of little shops and try to boil the ocean. This sector-specific approach would create a national network, improve efficiency, and sector expertise. In economically scarce times, we need to be smarter and work more efficiently together, coordinate across provincial efforts and multiple levels of government. But IP creation is only the first step. We must also ensure that Canadian IP remains in Canada. Throughout our history, Canada has struggled to retain our homegrown IP. The core ideas behind insulin, the electric wheelchair, the cardiac pacemaker were all developed here, yet commercialized abroad by foreign entities. We cannot allow this to happen again with AI. Today, 6 of the 10 largest recipients of Canadian-produced AI patents are foreign entities. This is unacceptable and must be addressed. Also, we must finally tackle the growing concerns on AI, data, and copyright. Many AI models are trained on unlicensed copyrighted materials, undermining the livelihoods of creators. Canada must fashion its copyright law so that authors' rights and their economic interests are properly protected. Each day, a new lawsuit seems to be launched, also calling into question fundamental issues of ethics and access to justice. These challenges are not new. I've studied the impact of emerging tech on creators since my doctorate at the University of Oxford over 20 years ago. Back then, the internet was the big disruptor. The lessons from this earlier tech and even earlier disruptions must inform our AI approach. While new tech brings benefits, the move fast and break things model has harmed us plenty. This issue matters not only for creators, but for Canada's broader economy, and it makes economic and sovereign sense for Canada to protect its data and copyright. Responsible AI adoption also requires addressing the energy demands of AI. And I can speak with some credibility here as I serve on the board of Electra Inc., Canada's second largest electricity company. Generative AI systems are far more resource intensive than traditional computing. As energy demands rise, we must build Canada's capacity and fix our aging grid. On a final and most telling note, and I conclude here, Canada must insist on a human-centered innovation approach, like Canada's Connected Mind CFREF program. While we harness the benefits of AI, we need to mitigate and predict the harms to protect our children and the most vulnerable members in society before the lawsuits, mental health issues, and other harms happen. Thank you again for inviting me, and I was looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, and I really appreciate you appearing before the committee and coming all the way from Toronto. I would really like to apologize that we didn't have the opportunity to ask you questions. So thanks a lot once again, and if there is anything you would like to specify, you can always send in in writing. So with that, you can leave. Okay?
Madam
Thank
Chair.
you once again.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we will, if the other 2 witnesses would like to wait, we will continue our debate on the motion by MP Noor Mohammed, and we will go back to MP Blanchet-Jonca.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente. Écoutez, j'ai eu des discussions avec mes collègues, démontrer ma bonne...
Thank you. Just to show my good faith and openness, I've had discussions with my colleagues. I believe there may be amendments that will be brought forward. I hope that we'll be able to wrap up this debate earlier than later and make sure that the initial motion is respected. That is to say that the Minister, Joly, is invited to this committee to be asked questions about her envelope, her portfolio, as well as her budget, and that we'll be able to bring a report to Parliament, as has always been the case, because this is an issue of credibility and transparency. And also so that colleagues who aren't here today are familiar with what will have been said in our conversations with the Minister. That concludes my remarks, Madam Chair.
On the list, then MP Noor Mohammed, and then Madame Deschrochers.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and again, apologies to the witnesses here. I'm going to propose 2 motions, if I could, quickly. One is, again, to my comments earlier about possibly extending this the study by one meeting so that we can hear again from those witnesses that should have been here for the first hour. I think
We will have to first deal with the motion we have
Okay,
on the
for
floor.
the motion on the floor?
Yes, first, and then
you.
we can go into the other items. So please, we have a motion on the floor, and the
Yes,
debate
and that-
is happening,
the-
and we have a list of speakers.
my proposed, I would hope, friendly amendments to the motion that has been put forward by my colleague would be this, that we, in the wording of his motion, add, to be consistent with my bloc colleague's earlier motion, that we add in not only the Minister of Industry, but the Minister of Artificial Intelligence and Digital Innovation, and that they appear no later than before Christmas. We remove, we not include the words report in this motion. And then that way we can have what Mr. Blanchette has been, Jean-Gas has been looking for, which was to have both ministers attend to speak about their mandates so that we can move forward, because the original conversations that we've had on the first motion dealt with the mandates. We're having the Minister of Artificial Intelligence appear on Wednesday in his capacity to talk about artificial intelligence. But the original motion that we were having difficulty with talked about inviting both ministers to talk about their mandates. And I took solace and comfort in the comments of my one Liberal colleague, Mr. Deschênes-Thériault, who talked about if we wanted to have meetings before the February 5th date, we can do that. So my hope is that we can propose doing so before Christmas.
Okay, so if you can please send your amendment in writing to the clerk so that we have it, and so that all the members can get to it. I will suspend the meeting for a few minutes so that everyone can have a washroom break also, and then we come back. So please send your amendment to the clerk of the committee. The meeting is suspended for a few minutes. Everyone can have their seats. I call the meeting to order. MP Baldinelli has the floor, and he will read the amendment which he is proposing. So, MP Baldinelli.
Again, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for my colleagues' indulgence. Again, this is my hope to find kind of somehow a solution to the issue that we're facing right now. So the motion that I had proposed, the friendly, I would hope it would be considered a friendly amendment, would be this: that the Standing Committee on Science and Research invite the Minister of Industry and the Minister of Artificial Intelligence and Digital Innovation to appear before the committee to discuss their mandates for no less than 2 hours each on or before December 11th, 2025.
So this is your amendment to the motion proposed by MP Noor Mohammed. MP Noor Mohammed.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I thank my colleague opposite for his amendment. Here's what I would say: I would be entirely supportive of inviting Minister Solomon to come back to speak on his mandate. I would be entirely supportive, as I noted from my earlier.
Sorry for interrupting.
Yes.
Like, I just need to tell Mr. MP Baldinelli about the amendment which he is proposing. So, as per the clerk, this is not an amendment. Can you please, it seems to be. I will ask the clerk to clarify.
No, I just wanted to say, usually an amendment amends the main motion, the text of the main motion, but the committee seems in an agreement to pursue this way. So I would guess that that's a new motion worded as an amendment. But if the committee wants to debate this motion, it's fine.
So, are you proposing an amendment to that motion, or?
Well, Madam Chair, in all fairness, to your earlier point, when the motion was originally tabled, it wasn't provided to us in a copy format, right? So I'm trying to find a solution to an indicated motion that was just spoken and not provided in text. So
if the members, everyone agrees, that's fine. We can proceed that way.
My hope that they would.
Does everyone agree with what MP Baldinelli is proposing, that we go ahead with it? It is up to the will of the committee members.
So just to
MP
clarify, just to clarify, are we treating? I'm happy to treat it as an amendment and work with Mr. Baldinelli and debate it, try to get to a good outcome. My understanding is that we're trying to land the plane of having Minister Joly appear, as well as now have Mr. Solomon appear again on mandate, both of which I think are reasonable things. I just want to make sure. I'm less concerned about the process we follow to get there and more concerned about getting to the outcome. So if it's easier to work with this as a new motion, great. If it's easier to work with this as an amendment, also great.
If members are okay, let's go ahead. So we have the wording from MP Baldinelli. And
okay, so then,
Mohammed? Yes.
you were done? Okay, so yeah. So then, okay, so here's what I would say. So on principle, I think it's a great idea to have both appear on mandate. We would be happy to support, but would propose two amendments to that. One is that we have them appear for an hour each as opposed to 2 hours each, because that's going to chew up another 2 meetings. And also, I would suggest that we say best efforts before December 11th, but no later than February 5, because December 11th is less than a week and a half away. And I note that both ministers are at the G7 during the period of time following the 4th through I don't know how many days thereafter. And then I understand that one of the ministers may be traveling. So what I don't want to do is to put ourselves in a situation where we are disappointed and frustrated, but I do want us to push hard to get them here as early as possible. And I don't think that ad infinitum into the new year is an acceptable answer either. So if we can put reasonable guardrails around that, I think we could probably live with it.
MP Baldinelli?
Is there no opportunity to do meetings virtually, Madam Chair, once we're risen from the House? I mean, during
So,
COVID, we
for
did
that,
it.
I would like to. So the chair has to be in person. the chair cannot be virtual, but that's like all logistic issue, and it's Christmas holidays. I cannot say anything, and I'm also traveling out of country, so I really cannot say that during the holidays we can. And if the ministers would be available, it's Christmas time. We have to be mindful of that.
But if
everyone
a committee
plans things
but
ahead
with
of
all
time.
due respect, but if a committee put forward a 106.4 and I had the support of all members to call an emergency meeting, we could do that, correct? Well, I put that theory on table now.
So,
MP Noor Mohammed.
so I'm going to propose 2 amendments to my friend's motion, if I might, to change the language that says 2 hours each to 1 hour each, and to add to the date, to add before December 11th, if possible, but no later than February 5th.
You are proposing an amendment
To the sub-amendment. Correct.
So, yes, we have that. Any debate on that? Seeing none.
Can
MP Baldinelli.
need a few minutes to caucus with my team, and then we'll come back if I could.
Okay, so just to have a respect for our witnesses, we have witnesses for the second panel also. We have 2 witnesses who have been waiting since 11 o'clock here. So maybe we can request the witnesses that they can leave, because I think it's not appropriate that like 2 hours into it and we still keep the witnesses. So is it all right if I request, if this is going to go on, I think it's not a good idea to keep the witnesses being held here. Yes, MP Blanchet-Jonca.
Madame la Présidente, je propose d'ajourner le débat.
Actually, I propose that we adjourn the debate on the motion.
A motion to adjourn the debate. It's a non-debatable, and we will have to vote on that.
Mr.
We can go to question period. Second hour of witnesses.
So, yes. So we have a motion. It is a non-debatable motion. We have a motion for to adjourn the debate. I will ask the clerk to please take the vote.
Point of order, Madam Chair. Are we adjourning debate on which? On the amendment, the sub-amendment, or the motion itself? Because we got 3, we're stacked right now. We've got there's my motion, there's an amendment to my motion, an amendment to the amendment. So we are adjourning debate on which of those 3 elements?
Just give me a second. Just to clarify, I've checked with the clerk before we get into the vote. We have a we have a motion to adjourn the debate because of the fact that the amendment which was accepted by Baldinelli, by all the committee members, everyone agreed, and now there is a sub-amendment to it. So this will adjourn debate on like the motion which was presented by MP Noor Mohammed, and then the amendment which was accepted, and then this some amendment which is on the floor. So we are going to vote for the adjournment of the debate. Please, the clerk will take the vote. Yes, please go. Yeah, so...
Mr. Noor Mohammed.
No.
Ms. McKelvey.
No.
Monsieur Rana. No. Monsieur Deschamps-Thériault.
No.
Mr. Baldinelli.
Yes.
Ms. De Ridder. Oh, sorry. Monsieur Ho.
Yes.
MP Ma.
Yes.
Mr. Mahal.
Yes.
Monsieur Blanchet-Jonca.
Oui.
5 yeas, 4 nays.
The debate is adjourned. MP Noor Mohammed.
Move to adjourn the meeting, please.
Okay, so we have a motion to adjourn the meeting. Is everyone in favor? Okay. We will have to take a vote on, because it's a non-debatable, we will vote on if the meeting can be adjourned.
Mr. No.
Yep.
Ms. McKelvey.
Yes.
Mr. Rana,
Yes.
Monsieur Deschamps-Thériault,
Oui.
Mr. Baldinelli,
No.
Mr. Ho,
No.
Mr. Ma,
No.
Mr. Mahal,
No.
Monsieur Blanchet-Jonca.
Non.
4 yeas, 5 nays. So, meeting can
Okay.
if you want, we can have the witnesses
Yeah.
and I'll suspend.
I will suspend the meeting so that the witnesses can come in and we will take the testimonies from everybody. So the meeting is suspended. we have two witnesses from the first panel, Dr. Arvind Gupta and Dr. Gail Murphy. We never released them, and they have been waiting. Sorry for all you had to go through since 11 o'clock. And we have three witnesses from the second panel, which is Canadian Nuclear Association, George Christidis, President and Chief Executive Officer, Cohor Inc., Joel Penoy, Chief AI Officer, and Electricity Canada, Francis Bradley, President and Chief Executive Officer. So we will hear from five witnesses, and Dr. Arvind Gupta appearing as an individual, professor from the Department of Computer Science, University of Toronto, and Dr. Gail Murphy from University of British Columbia. She is Vice President, Research and Innovation, joined by video conference. All the witnesses will have 5 minutes for their opening remarks. And sorry for all the delays. We sometimes have to deal with these procedures. So on behalf of the committee, I would like to apologize for your time. Please, we will start with Dr. Arvind Gupta. Please,
Point d'information, Madame la
Mr.
Présidente.
Gupta, you will have 5 minutes. Please go. Yes.
Oui.
Sorry, Mr.
Point of
Blanc.
order?
Juste clarifier, là.
Madam Chair, just to clarify, until when we can sit, how much time we will have per party for questions and so on, just to make sure we're respecting the logistical time that we have left.
We will hear from our witnesses, and then we will see what the resources are like and what it is. So we will start with Dr. Gupta for 5. Yes, MP Blanchet-Jonca.
Juste comprendre, là, ils ont 5 minutes environ
Yeah,
maximum.
but just to understand, they have about 5 minutes each, but I'm trying to understand also to adjust the length of my own questions, how much time I will have afterwards to continue the sitting of the committee. Until when can we sit?
To see, because we have the question period also, we will hear from witnesses and then see where we are. And I will let you know after we hear from our witnesses what time we have. Okay? So please, without any delay, Dr. Gupta, go ahead. You will have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the members of the committee for inviting me today. I am Arvind Gupta. I'm a professor of computer science at the University of Toronto. I was also a member of the AI Strategy Task Force that was convened by Minister Solomon. Canada is proudly the birthplace of deep learning, and we continue to be a world leader in the foundational techniques that define the artificial intelligence revolution. AI is a very fast-changing technology, and one thing we are certain about is that this technology will continue to evolve at a very rapid pace. Now, we know that AI has the potential to fundamentally transform our economy and our society, but it is less certain how this will happen. We must develop policies that allow us to incorporate the potential of AI while managing the many challenges that this technology brings to us. The rapid development of AI and the potential for significant disruptions call for Canada's AI strategy to be centered on ensuring that we stay at the forefront of AI. We must be a leader in developing the underlying foundational techniques of AI. We must develop the mechanisms to leverage this technology for the benefit of all Canadians, and we must ensure that the systems we develop are ethical, fair, and transparent. All Canadians must see that they have a place in the AI revolution, that they can garner the skills that allow them to navigate and emerge on the other side of this revolution better and stronger. I want to give you some of the common themes that we heard on the task force. First, it's important that the Canadian government identify priorities and direct resources to those priorities. Because the AI landscape is changing so quickly, and geopolitics is playing a bigger and bigger role in the adoption of AI, we cannot afford to take a peanut butter approach to policymaking. Government must build on our strengths, must ensure that AI is broadly diffused, and that Canadians see the benefit of this technology. Number two, research and talent are the bedrock of any national AI strategy. Because AI is evolving so quickly, Canada can only benefit if we stay at the forefront as an AI thought leader. We cannot be successful without building an expansive talent pool, trained to apply the latest AI techniques. We must take an inclusive approach to training, ensuring widespread understanding and appreciation of artificial intelligence. We must ensure the best and brightest from around the world are attracted to Canada, ready to contribute to Canada being an AI leader. There's widespread belief, and the media propagates the belief, that AI can only benefit the few and negatively impact the many. I do not believe that that is a valid way of seeing this technology. Done right, Canada and Canadians can all benefit from this new technology. So public policy should focus on ensuring that we have the instruments in place to address the changes that are coming from this technology. Perhaps no issue has gained more attention than the potential for AI to result in large-scale employment disruptions. We do not yet know the extent or the impact of AI on employment, but now is the time to make sure we develop training and skills programs to allow Canadians to better understand AI, understand the disruptions it may cause, and understand where the new opportunities may arise. Canadians must have confidence that their government is aware of these challenges. They must believe that business leaders are giving their teams and their employees necessary AI competencies. And governments must start thinking about the social safety nets that we may need if these disruptions are widespread. We must take a multidisciplinary, multi-sectoral approach to building new AI systems, because AI will impact across all scientific disciplines, across all economic sectors. It will impact the way we relate to each other and the way we do business. We must think about issues like privacy for healthcare as AI impacts the healthcare system, privacy in the way
if
we
you can
deal
please
with...
wind up.
One more second. The way we deal with government, education, and finance. And let me conclude by saying that this ethical use of AI is perhaps the most important issue that we must take on. How do we take this new technology on board and apply it in a way that everyone understands that it's being done in a fair and transparent manner? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Gupta. We will now proceed to Dr. Murphy for 5 minutes. Please go ahead, Dr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for inviting me to join you today. As you've heard, I'm Gail Murphy. I'm Vice President, Research and Innovation, and a Professor of Computer Science at the University of British Columbia. I currently serve as the Vice Chair of the Digital Research Alliance of Canada, which is a national, not-for-profit organization with the mandate to provide compute, data, and software for Canadian researchers. And I recently had the honor of serving as a member of the Government of Canada's AI Strategy Task Force. I'm joining you from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Musqueam people, for centuries a place of learning and discovery. UBC is the second largest research university in Canada with nearly 80,000 students and more than 17,000 faculty and staff at campuses in Vancouver and Kelowna and sites throughout BC. Today, over 100 UBC faculty members and hundreds of students are focused on fundamental and applied AI research in the vibrant BC AI ecosystem, establishing and growing companies, integrating AI into the health system, and furthering critical industry sectors like the life sciences, critical minerals, and forestry. AI as a research field is moving at warp speed, with new discoveries every day. Keeping a pace is not only imperative, it's essential. Only 3 years ago, the power of large language models born from Canadian ingenuity became evident to the public. Already, those at the forefront of AI are thinking about how to move beyond the limitations of these models. We cannot rely on letting others invent the future of AI. We need to keep inventing it here in Canada with Canadian values. But we also need to do more to ensure the discoveries we make find their way into application in ways that benefit Canadians. Moving AI research into application is challenging, in part because of the many pathways by which AI can be used. One pathway is through the formation of AI-first companies, which place AI at the core of their strategy and operations. For example, Variational AI, a Vancouver-based company working with UBC researchers, is focused on providing a foundational model to speed up drug discovery. AI-first companies often require significant infrastructure to build the models on which they rely. Another pathway is when AI is embedded into products or services. For example, UBC researchers have shown how diagnosis in rural, remote, and Indigenous communities such as Haida Gwaii can be improved through the right combination of training, handheld ultrasound devices, cloud platforms, and AI. Making this pathway a reality requires support to bring AI experts together with domain experts. Yet another pathway is to develop AI solutions with critical points in the supply chain of different economic sectors. For instance, UBC professor Frank Wood has created the UBC spin-off Inverted AI, which is building predictive human behavior models for autonomous driving. Supporting these companies to be successful can require rethinking how to integrate Canadian companies into global trade supply chains. There's 4 key areas in which we can start to better support the continuum in these pathways. First, research. Canada can stay at the forefront of AI discovery by enhancing and expanding the AI Institute model. The institutes can be enhanced to serve as hubs that bring talent from universities, colleges, technical institutes, and industry together to address mission-driven dual-purpose challenges. The institute should be expanded to fully deploy world-class talent that is currently underutilized, including in BC. Second, focus. Canada should aim to focus and accelerate specific areas of global strength. Focus could be brought through missions or challenges posed to the AI institutes. Potential areas of focus that could broadly benefit Canadians and the Canadian economy are AI for health and AI for robotics. Third, AI supply chains. Canada should aim to globally lead in critical parts of the global AI supply chain for particular sectors. In selected areas, Canada can establish pre-competitive industrial research and development centers based on successful models in other countries for different kinds of technologies. These centers accelerate industry within the country, create new companies, and a highly trained workforce. Fourth, compute infrastructure. Canada lags its peers for AI research infrastructure on multiple rankings. To support discovery and application related to Canadians, large-scale sovereign compute with access to Canadian data is needed for both researchers and SMEs. The Digital Research Alliance of Canada is well positioned to lead on this infrastructure for Canada. I hope that the committee finds these contributions to its study helpful, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. I look forward to addressing any questions you may have.
Thank you, Dr. Murphy, and we will now proceed to Mr. George Christidis, representing Canadian Nuclear Association. Please go ahead. You will have 5 minutes.
Thank you, and very much appreciate the opportunity to meet with you today. I was going to say good morning, but I'll say good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the Standing Committee. It's a privilege to appear before you today to speak on behalf of the Canadian Nuclear Association. For over 60 years, the CNA has been the voice of Canada's nuclear industry, and today we represent over 120 members from coast to coast, from world-leading utilities, key uranium mining companies, as well as the important Canadian supply chain based on CANDU technology that makes one of the world's leading nuclear technology ecosystem that employs over 89,000 Canadians directly and indirectly. We're pleased to be taking part in today's hearing, which is very important. The Canadian nuclear industry is a strategic asset that enables Canada's goals in terms of economic, energy security, innovation, as a means of creating jobs and investments that supports national and provincial goals. It is critical not just for energy, but for our economic competitiveness, long-term energy security, and environmental sustainable goals that nuclear be considered, nuclear technologies. This strength is rooted in our world-class domestic capabilities from our vast uranium reserves, robust end-to-end nuclear supply chain to our nuclear reactor technologies, R&D expertise, vital contributions to nuclear medicine, such as the production of isotopes that is key in fighting cancers and other illnesses. We are actively demonstrating this capability and capacity through highly successful refurbishments of Bruce and Darlington nuclear sites, which are $26 billion on time and on budget. There's also the planned refurbishment at Pickering and constructions all the way for small modular reactors at Darlington in Ontario that are world leading. There's active planning now for large reactors in Ontario, as well as the inclusion of nuclear technologies in key provinces such as New Brunswick, Alberta, and Saskatchewan. And there are huge opportunity in terms of new nuclear export opportunities globally that will create jobs in Canada and enhance our collective geopolitical capabilities. We applaud the recent federal government's inclusion of nuclear in key initiatives to support the development of this technology and the development of these projects across Canada. However, more will need to be done in order to meet very important goals. This includes how do we finance nuclear projects. It includes regulatory regimes that will all in the end feed to the possibility of enabling AI and data center capability in Canada. Continued government and private sector investments are key, as well as efficient regulatory regime to ensure the strategic sectors enables growth that will create critical jobs and investments in Canada. A renewed interest in nuclear energy is being observed across Canada and around the world, driven by imperatives such as energy security, geopolitical stability, as well as accelerating the electrification of industry, transport, heating, and meeting climate objectives. It is also foundational for consideration in terms of AI sector as it develops in Canada. Today, along with the need for more electricity and energy across Canada, the emerging growth of artificial intelligence and data centers requires significant increased need for more reliable energy that's non-emitting. Nuclear will play or has to play an important piece in that effort. Nuclear energy is key to the electrification of key sectors, as well as creating new opportunities in Canada. The rapid growth of artificial intelligence industry will add to the already unprecedented forecast for more energy across the board. And I have to stress this. Already without artificial intelligence and data center technology demands for more electricity, there's a tripling on each provincial grid in terms of meeting 20 by 50 goals. Already without data centers or AI, most provinces are seeing the tripling of demand by 2050. We estimate that modern artificial intelligence models and data centers that will increase further this demand that will be seen across the country. This is where nuclear generated electricity is key. Nuclear energy provides reliable, carbon-free baseload power that will enable artificial intelligence industry requirements. This is a means by which Canada could be an attractive destination to invest in this sector as well as in others. The nuclear sector creates high-paying skilled jobs, and this will be critical in any debate on how artificial intelligence and data centers impact employment and growth in terms of other sectors. The battle to host these new data centers is an economic and, in some say, national security discussion that will require significant electricity. That means needing more non-emitting, cost-effective energy to meet economic and environmental goals. Yet, I should be clear, the momentum behind Canada's nuclear expansion is not dependent on artificial intelligence boom. Our industry must and will continue to grow regardless, driven by our national commitment to electrification across our economy and the need to replace aging infrastructure and grow demand for clean, non-emitting power. The artificial intelligence imperative simply reinforces how important it is to avoid delays and make sure that the right support is in place to ensure the continued success of our industry, an enabler to other key sectors. With that, I thank you for the opportunity, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to speak to you today.
Thank you. And with that, now we will proceed to Madame Pino. Please go ahead. You will have 5 minutes for your opening statements.
Merci. Bonjour, Madame. Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to come speak to you. I'm Joëlle Pinault, Director of AI, Chief AI Officer at Cohere Inc., and I'm also a professor at McGill University and core member of MILA.
Canada helped invent modern artificial intelligence. Our researchers lit the fuse for the deep learning revolution, and the Pan-Canadian AI strategy, CFAR Vector Mila Ami, turned this country into a global magnet for talent. Cohere is one of the direct products of that success. Our founders, Aidan Gomez, Nick Frost, Ivan Zhang, met in the AI ecosystem around the University of Toronto, working in the same community that produced many of today's breakthroughs. When they started Cohere in 2019, they faced a choice: follow the well-worn path south, or prove that a global AI company could be built and scaled in Canada. They chose Canada, and I decided to join Cohere earlier this year to further this leadership. Today, Cohere is proudly headquartered in Toronto with teams across the company, Montreal, Vancouver, as well as all over the world. That decision wasn't just patriotic, it was a response to a pattern we have seen for decades. Canada consistently produces era-defining innovations: batteries, insulin, sonar, and today deep learning. Our founders and the Canadian seed investors who continue to support us saw the same thing beginning to happen with AI. Cohere was founded in Canada in part to help break that cycle. Canada now has the chance to be a leading player in that race, exporting our technology instead of importing it. If we choose to move with speed and agility, we can narrow our productivity gap, keep talent here at home, and fully build on our early successes in AI. We're now at a watershed moment. AI has moved from academic curiosity to the decisive factor in national productivity, security, and economic sovereignty. Around the world, countries are no longer just competing firm to firm, they're competing nation to nation, mobilizing heads of state, strategic investors, and defense budgets to back their AI champions and lock in technology choices for decades. Dans ce contexte, Cohere est présent.
In this context, Cohere is the only fundamental model laboratory in Canada that is competitive on a global scale. We develop language models and AI agents specifically for businesses and governments, with an emphasis on privacy, security, multilingual capability, and sovereign deployment. What sets us apart from other multinational AI companies that provide technologies to the general public is that our solutions are tailor-made for organizations for whom security and privacy are essential. Cohere has become a global springboard for developing local talent and actively contributing to the AI research agenda. We are proof that Canadian research and expertise can be commercialized. Your study is based on 4 pillars, and I would like to briefly discuss each of them. First, with regard to advances in basic and applied research, to remain at the forefront, our universities and institutes need research funding, access to computing power, bilingual datasets, and structured bridges to industry so that researchers can transform innovations from their laboratories into products.
Centers and scale-ups. The single largest constraint we hear, and we ourselves feel, is infrastructure. We support an expanded national compute strategy, a shared purchasing consortium, and the creation of a national AI data fabric. Third, on the role of the federal government, the most powerful thing Ottawa can do now is to become the first and best customer of Canadian AI, modernizing procurement and shifting to a posture of true partnership where technologies tested first here are exported globally. Finally, on the protection of Canadian AI discoveries, Canada should prioritize continuing to train and retain the best and the brightest, helping its businesses scale by encouraging global investment and ensuring our allies are using our technologies with commercial diplomacy. Cohere stands ready to be Canada's national AI partner. We are proud of our roots, proud to be building our business on Canadian soil while expanding globally, and proud to be part of an ecosystem that still punches far above its weight. With deliberate federal leadership, we can ensure that the next chapter of AI is built, deployed, and owned here in Canada. Thank you, and I hope we have time for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Pino. Thanks a lot for coming. And now we will proceed to Mr. Bradley, representing Electricity Canada. He's President and Chief Executive Officer. Please go ahead, Mr. Bradley. You will have 5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, puis merci
Thank
de
you very much. And thank you for inviting me today to give you our perspectives from Electricity Canada this afternoon. Yes, my name is Frances Bradley. I'm President and CEO of Electricity Canada.
to speak to the Science and Research Committee on the Study of Artificial Intelligence. Electricity Canada is the national voice of the electricity industry. Our members are the companies that generate, transmit, distribute electricity to customers right across the country from coast to coast to coast in every province and every territory. Our industry impacts all social, environmental, and economic facets of life. Whether it be keeping the lights on, driving down emissions in other sectors, or powering one of the largest economies in the world, Canadian electricity is foundation to it all. Electricity is essential to artificial intelligence. Without it, AI cannot be deployed at scale. A query tool such as ChatGPT can use 10 times more electricity than a traditional web search. To grow the AI economy and realize the potential of this new technology, we need power to support the data centers that enable AI. To put it in context, global electricity demand from data centers is projected to double by 2026, next year, reaching 1,000 terawatt hours next year. And that's enough to power Japan. In Canada, electricity demand is expected to at least double by 2050, driven by economic growth, by electrification, and growth in data centers. This will require our sector to build more generation, transmission, and distribution infrastructure in the next 25 years than we have in the previous several generations. To meet the challenge, Canada must change its regulatory and financing tools to enable this massive build-out. To achieve this, we have 4 key recommendations. First, we cannot scale up AI in data centers without growing our grids. Canada must eliminate the barriers to building critical electricity infrastructure. This can be achieved through meaningful regulatory and permitting reform so that projects can be approved within 2 years. For example, we welcome the government's efforts to streamline approvals, such as the creation of the Major Projects Office. Additionally, the Memorandum of Understanding between the Government of Canada and the Government of Alberta, which will begin a path to the suspension of the implementation and management of the clean electricity regulations in that province, shows a path for better intergovernmental coordination. As we've said before, provincial electricity system operators are best positioned to make the decisions that ensure a reliable and affordable grid. Second, the government needs to facilitate investments in expanding electricity infrastructure. This includes implementing the Clean Electricity Investment Tax Credit, which we were pleased to see in the federal budget, and addressing critical funding gaps and barriers to investment, such as the EIFEL rules. Third, the government must include the electricity sector in AI conversations and policy design from the start. There is currently no representative from the electricity sector on the federal AI task force. We cannot have a successful AI strategy without the electricity sector. In short, there is no AI without kilowatts. Lastly, as we build out our infrastructure, we need to ensure that critical infrastructure is protected. The government should ensure that we are prepared to protect critical infrastructure and the new cyber threats that are posed by AI. This was evident in reports of cyber attacks using independent AI agents, such as Claude Code, to hack into a variety of organizations at a low cost and fast manner. Every new technology brings new challenges, and we need to be prepared for them. To conclude, significant growth in electricity demand will come as AI use continues to increase. Canada must be ready to meet the growth, and we must build for that future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bradley. As we are at almost 1:45 and all the members have to go to the question period, so is it the will of the committee that we adjourn the meeting?
Yes.
Mr. MP Baldinelli?
Well, if we adjourn, what happens is then that is it?
That is it.
And these witnesses will not be asked to return again?
So there are two options. Either we adjourn the meeting, and then Wednesday we have the minister appearing before the committee. If we don't agree to adjourn, we suspend, and then we get back on Wednesday. But I'm not sure who will be available out of these witnesses because it takes a lot of time to schedule those meetings. I am not sure whether if all the witnesses will be available.
Well, earlier we had discussed the possibility of putting forward a motion to add a day to this study and ensure that all the witnesses that are appearing here today, just those witnesses, be asked back to attend an additional meeting of this study.
For that, we will need a motion. 1 second. So the motion which we are studying on AI is said at least 4 meetings. So if you want to add a meeting, we will have to see when these witnesses are available. But now because it's we have to get all the members have to get to the question period. Yes. So
that would be my motion to all my colleagues to extend by 1 day and invite all these witnesses back, including the first hour, so that we can hear from them. Virtually or in person.
Yes. Just 1 second.
Maybe we can suspend and sort this out.
It's question period time. So if we suspend, everyone will leave. Witnesses will have to leave. So if we adjourn,
put it to a vote. Let's put it to a vote. We don't need to suspend. I think we got
Madam
majority here.
just 1 second. Can you please repeat the motion, what you are saying, MP Baltinelli? Then we will come to you.
To extend the AI hearings by 1 further meeting, and that meeting be dedicated to hearing from all of those witnesses that appeared today so that they could fully not only provide their testimony, but actually have time to take questions and answers from the members, all members of this committee.
Okay, so we have a motion. So MP Rana.
Already had their testimony. If we have any questions, we can send those in writing and we can get answers in writing instead of calling again and spending again resources.
I think the public deserves to know.
That was unusual to send questions. Like if there are some questions which are raised in a meeting, they can respond if they don't get an opportunity today, but we cannot send them the questions to respond. So MP Deschamps, sorry for the pronunciation, MP Deschamps-Terrier.
Proposer une motion pour suspendre les travaux.
Yes, I'd like to table a motion to suspend our meeting.
If the meeting is suspended, then we come back on Wednesday at 4:30 to start this meeting. And then we have the minister appearing before the committee. Minister for AI is scheduled to appear before the committee on Wednesday at 4:30. So if we suspend, that will be the case. MP Mahal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, in spirit of fairness to the witnesses and to the committee in general or in whole, I would agree with my colleague, MP Baldinelli, that we should have at least one more meeting on this so that the testimony that we heard from all the witnesses should be better utilized. Having written questions are not going to serve the purpose because there are so many questions that can arise at the same time. So it's always beneficial if we can have them live back. And I think that is the committee, the purpose of committee is only best served if we have another hearing on this same topic. Thank you.
Point d'information, Madame la Présidente.
Yes, I'd like some information. I understand that my colleague wants to adjourn the committee. That would mean that his colleague, the minister from government, will not appear. Is that what would happen? Because if we adjourn, that means
Have the minister on Wednesday, but if we suspend, then we will not have the minister on Wednesday, and we will have to continue with this meeting.
Merci.
So we have a motion from MP Baldinelli to extend this study by one meeting. MP Deschamps, are you moving the motion to suspend the meeting?
En fait, je me suis révisé, donc en termes, je peux pas.
Actually, I don't think I'll request a suspension, but an adjournment rather. That's what I should have requested, an adjournment.
So we have a motion to adjourn the debate, like adjourn the meeting. Now we have, okay, 1 second, 1% at a time, please, no cross-talk. We have a motion to adjourn the meeting. So is everyone in favor to adjourn the meeting? Okay. Okay, so everyone is, sorry, no cross-talk, please. Like all the questions should be directed through the chair. We have to get back to the question period, so we need to decide ASAP what we need to do. So is everybody in favor to adjourn the meeting? No objections? The meeting is, I really want to thank the witnesses. I would really like to apologize for and appreciate the patience which you have shown. So the meeting is adjourned.